All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name's David Huxley from icare's mobile engagement team, coming to you from the far north coast of New South Wales, where I live. And I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians on the local Bundjalung people and the various lands in which we all work and meet today. Any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us for this session. Now, before I introduce today's special guest and subject matter expert, I just want to cover off on a little bit of housekeeping. With nearly 1,000 registrations for today's webinar, everyone's camera and mic are disabled, so there'll be no interruptions. The chat box will remain open as we will be hosting a couple polls in a moment, but we also want your feedback at the end of the session also. With regards to questions, it can be really difficult to respond to specific questions. And we want to keep the session on track, so we probably won't be responding to questions throughout. And the idea of these sessions is to keep them short and sharp and on point, and hopefully not to go over the 30-minute time frame. Now, we also have Madeline in the background, behind the scenes, just ensuring all the technology works, everyone can hear and see what we're presenting. The final bit of housekeeping that I'm going to add is that the session is being recorded and will be made available on our webpage in probably 2 to 3 weeks' time. And for any brokers that may be attending the session, we will provide you with the code to claim your CPD points at the end of the session on the very final slide. Now, I'd like to introduce my special guest for the webinar, and it's actually my colleague and return to work subject matter expert from the mobile engagement team. That was a mouthful. Adam O'Leary, how are things today in the Shire, mate? Are you staying warm?
Good morning, Hux. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while since you've invited me to one of our webinars here. But yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some useful information around return to work.
And look, I'll just call out that this session that we are hosting today is something that we have been delivering all around New South Wales, in a face-to-face environment with customers. So recently we've delivered the session in Hurstville, and we did a road trip up to Tamworth and Armidale. And next month we'll be up in my neck of the woods, up in Ballina, running a face-to-face version of what we're running through here today. Now, look, Adam, I thought maybe the best way to kick off the session, is to maybe look at some of the common stats around common injuries, mechanism of injuries, some of the costs associated with injuries, that type of thing. This might just set the scene in terms of what's happening in the New South Wales scheme. Then we can discuss how this information can be useful for employers when they are considering risks for their own business. So let's quiz the group and see what they think in the form of a poll, which we're going to bring up now. We've got Maddie behind the scenes bringing up the poll. And I'll ask the questions if you like, and you can talk through the answers here. So with regards to average days off per claim, in New South Wales, we have approximately 62,000 claims each and every year. But what is the average days off work per claim? Is it 19 days, 39 days, 79 days, or 109 days? So everyone's got the opportunity here to respond, Adam, on the screen, and I hit submit. The box should disappear. Any responses coming through there?
Yeah, there's a few there, Hux.
Should we share the answer?
I think we bring it up.
So at 79 days, that's the average, 62,000 claims, 79 days off per claim. It's pretty significant, isn't it?
It is. It's a when you consider that, Hux, like you're talking about 2.5 months off work. It's not easy for business to cover that type of absenteeism.
That is a long time, which brings us to our very second question. What is the average cost per claim in New South Wales? If you think about the first question, this may be related. Is it $2,000 in cost, $12,000, $22,000, or $32,000? All quite large sums of money when you look at it. So let's, everyone's responding here. A lot of people are going for 22 or 32. There's the answer there, 32. So quite large numbers, and most people got that right there. So we'll move on to the next one. Now, this is about reporting injuries, and we'll talk a lot more about reporting injuries and the importance of early reporting in a moment. So what percentage of claims are reported within 5 calendar days? Is it 59, 69, or 89%? What are people thinking here? A lot of people going 59% there. Let's bring it up, hey? 59%.
Yeah, that's a really low stat, and we'll go through a bit more detail in regard to that one shortly. But ultimately, that means that 41% of those claims are incurring in excess.
That's exactly right. When you look at the other dial there, when we look at a psychological claim, I know you refer to this in a moment, only 26 or 27% of these claims are reported within 5 calendar days. So quite a long delay there. So anyway, we'll move on. So we've just got a couple more to get through here. Okay, so in New South Wales, what injury type generates the highest number of claims? Sprains and strains, wounds and lacerations, fractures, or is it burns? A few answers are coming through here. Most people are going for the strains and sprains, which is pretty good considering that's the answer. Majority of people got that right there, which is pretty good. People are pretty on the ball here. So the final question before we get into it is with regards to bodily injury. So what bodily injury location or what location on the body generates the highest number of claims? Is it the upper limbs, the lower limbs, the trunk? Yes, the old workers' comp back, isn't it, Adam? And or could it be the neck? Let's see what people are thinking here.
Yeah, this normally is a bit of a tricky one, Hux, when we do ask it regionally.
We do. Quite a few people do get it wrong. We do try to sort of trick them there with a little reference to the workers' comp back, because there it is, the upper limb at 39% of most injuries coming through. So a lot of people got that right, and a few people are putting in different answers there in the chat. So so Adam, so look, now we've just shared a bunch of stats. I'm sure many employers are probably thinking right now, so what? What does this mean to me, and how can this information help me improve return to work at my workplace?
Yeah, well, Hux, I think outside of the lost productivity piece that we spoke about, when you consider that 79 days, that is obviously going to have varying impacts for different business, particularly small business, because obviously the workforce is smaller and it does take a little bit more energy to be able to cover those absent people, injured workers. But you should always pay great attention to your claims as part of work health and safety and or risk mitigation to promote safe and sustainable business. But if you're looking at these type stats and wanting to compare them to your business, and again, it varies upon the amount of claims that you may generate over a 12-month period, as an example, is you can compare your durations. So time off, in other words, you could say, how long does it take for your worker to return to work? 79 days is the scheme average. Ultimately, your target is to beat that. And I know that there's various types of injuries, but shortly we'll go through the process as to how we may be able to help minimize the absenteeism or the durations. With regard to the average cost of claims, generally that does also relate to the return to work durations. The longer someone's off, the higher the impact on claims costs. And also for experience rated customers, as some may already know, those who pay greater than $30,000 in premium, there is also a claims cost built into your premium. So there is that interest in ensuring that you can minimize the costs because you want to minimize the expense on premium. When you look at the types of injuries that are occurring, you're looking at around 40% sprains and strains, 40% upper body. You can apply that to your own workplace and just look at the various tasks that your workers have to undertake. Keep that in mind, that from an icare injury perspective, that obviously sprains and strains of the upper limbs is something that you should keep an eye on. And if you can prevent or eliminate that within your workplace, use those stats as consideration. And then finally, we spoke about the delays in reporting. So every business does actually have a legal obligation to report within 48 hours, but the 5-day reporting time frame is there to encourage employers to report claims earlier. and there is a penalty if you don't, and that is an excess, and that excess is generally equivalent to a week's wages, and that can amount up to around $2,400, and it's simple to avoid that, and that is by just reporting claims within 5 days.
So lots of reasons to report claims, obviously as soon as possible. But let's talk through what employers can do now to be prepared in case they have a workplace injury, one day in the future. So what types of actions and processes can employers take to support a worker's return to work even before they get injured?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to some of the on the back of what we've just spoken about then, Hux, is to have an idea as to what exposures you have within your workplace. So again, from an employee's perspective, if you've had any experience with managing claims before, that puts you in better stead. If you haven't, it doesn't matter, because there's always people who can support you. Have you got a good understanding of all the various roles within your organization? Again, to look at the different tasks, and we'll shortly go through the job task analysis, and that'll give you an idea in regard to what we're looking at there. Have you got an active work health and safety committee that does actively look at identifying workplace risks? Return to work programs are a must for business. It provides clear direction for not only the injured worker, but the employer in regard to what the steps will look like when it comes to particularly graduated return to work, or those workers who are returning on a suitable duties basis. And then if you have got minimal skill and experience in managing a return to work, as I said, we do have experts in the field. We've got the brokers, as you referenced earlier, Hux, as well as rehabilitation providers and the case managers, who should be able to provide you with some guidance in regard to what your steps should look like.
All right, well, what we'll do now, we'll move on. I'll just get the slide to change for me. There we go here. So you just referenced, Adam, a number of key pieces of information to help an employer get prepared should they experience a workplace injury, and hopefully to get the best possible outcome for not only the worker that might be injured, but the workplace, other staff that might be involved, and as well as customers for a business as well. So we're going to talk through a tool that an employer can create to support a speedier return to work. And as you referenced, this document is called a job task analysis. And I'll just let everyone know on the call that they will receive a copy of a template of this job task analysis on an email, which will be sent out after the session, maybe later today or perhaps tomorrow. And in a moment, we're going to take you through how to complete it. But first of all, I'll just quickly summarize what the job task analysis is. So it summarizes the different roles and duties within a workplace. So look at the physical requirements of roles, lifting capacities. Does a role require squatting, sitting, standing, this type of thing? Different environmental factors. Are they working outside, inside, nighttime, daytime? What's the weather like, that type of thing, and maybe equipment that may be used as well. So each job task analysis will probably be unique and vary from business to business and maybe from role to role as well. And look, when you're completing a job task analysis or preparing one, it's good to get the consultation of staff, maybe use someone experienced in this type of thing to help put that together. And sometimes if you're not that comfortable in doing that, you may be able to get, as you've referenced, a rehab provider or a broker to support and assist you with that. But obviously there might be a fee attributed to that as well. So let's look at a hypothetical example of a job task analysis now, Adam, based on a made-up example of a made-up role, and we can discuss how it can be useful after injury has occurred, and we can look at the benefits of that as well.
Okay, thanks, Huck. So this is an example we actually do use when we do host our live events, and we do obtain some interaction with this. But being a webinar, we are kind of limited in that regard. As you can see, this is fairly basic type of example. But ultimately, Brad, he's a general labourer. He has several role requirements, as you can see listed down the left of the screen there: truck driving, forklift driving, tarping, sweeping, shoveling, and some logistical planning type stuff. You look at then the physical demands of the role. So again, you can see the sitting, climbing. There's some weight associated to that when it comes to the shoveling and the tarping with the 5 kilos and the 10 kilos. There's some overhead work with tarping, etc. And then it's breaking it down. And so it's not applying any rocket science, but it's just breaking it down to averages when it comes to the average timing of each of those tasks. So you can see there with regard to the driving aspect, the truck driving is around 13 hours a week, and that equates to 33% of the time of the week that he is driving a truck. And sitting, climbing again, so more driving with the forklift is another 14 hours. So it's quite simple when you look at that. Okay, sitting, climbing, there's 68%. I did that without a calculator, Hux.
Well done, well done. All right, so look, despite Brad being a general labourer, it sounds like Brad actually has a diverse range of activities within his normal role when you break it down just like you have. So let's apply this information to what we know about Brad's normal role to create a job task analysis for Brad, maybe other staff that have a similar role in the business. And I'll just bring up that template now. Here we go. We're going to talk through that, Adam, what we've done there with Brad.
Yeah, sure. So this kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot in regard to what the job task analysis looks like. So the first part of the job task analysis looks at the three most physically demanding tasks. And you can see there, and just as I had mentioned to everyone here, and I just want to be clear again, this is a made up role, made up person. But you can see there that forklift driving and truck driving are his the first two tasks that we've identified, primarily due to the fact that they take up most of Brad's time. And when we talk about physically demanding, we're not talking about how heavy it is or how much weight you have to push or pull or whatever else. It's just more about the physical demand. So sitting for extended periods of time is a physical demand in itself. And then you look at the third task there, which looks at the shoveling. So he has on average around 7 hours of shoveling per week, but he also has weight associated with that, which is the up to 10 kilos that he may be shoveling at any one time. It's not every scoop is 10 kilos, but that's just looking at what the maximum would probably be at any one time. To the right of the screen, you can see the top part of the screen there. It's got the job task analysis frequency key, and this is what we use to determine the frequency of the task. And so if you look there, the I, F, and C stands for infrequent, frequent, and constant. If it's infrequent, it's generally less than 20% of the time that he's performing that particular task. If it's frequent, it's between 20 and 60% of the time. And if it's constant, it's more than 60% of the time. So you can see there's some highlighted boxes there, and you can see where we've also completed the frequency as per each of the physical demands. So you can see sitting, and we already referenced that it was 68% of the time on that last slide. And so you can see that that's over 60%, so that's constant. With standing, it was frequent. With walking and running, it was infrequent. And so the idea of this is to provide that analysis in regard to what Brad's role looks like. And this type of analysis can be applied to all the various roles that you have within your organization. And when you put these individual job task analysis together, it creates a job dictionary, which some of you may have already heard about.
Well, that seems easy enough, Adam, but hold on, mate. I'm just getting a text message through, and I'm sharing it on my screen. Can you see that come through now?
I can see that, Hux.
Yeah, it says here, hi, Hux. Letting you know I've hurt myself and I'm off to the doc. All right, so look, I've just received this text message, Adam. What are some considerations in different ways to respond to this, and what should we be doing?
Well, I think for starters, Hux, it's looking at what don't we know here. And again, this is for everyone watching today's session, this is something we rehearse a lot, and it works really well live. But this is where you would look at text messaging is a very common means of communication these days. It's very easy, very quick, and it means you don't have to have verbal discussions. The unfortunate thing about workers' compensation, I think, is there's still quite a stigma that sits behind it. So again, that is a means of not having to talk about it, but just sending the message through. So what we don't know about this, Hux, is for starters, I don't know who this is from, because if you look at the little icon, the iPhone icon in the middle of the screen, it's got no name there. I don't know who has been injured, when they were injured, if they are one of my workers, what's happened, are they okay? And so I suppose the immediate response for me would be to make that immediate verbal contact. I wouldn't text them back, although I may be busy, but you have to make contact. For starters, in any instance, you'll want to care for your workforce. You want to make sure that everyone is okay. Gain the detailed information with regard to the injury, what happened when it occurred, and then offer that support to make sure that appropriate first aid is provided, and or that the family is also informed if it is something that is a bit more serious. What we don't do is, as I mentioned, delay any response. Do not make the verbal contact. So again, send text responses. That's, as I think we all could agree, text can be taken out of context a lot too. And don't become defensive or aggressive. Accidents do happen, and the simple fact of the matter is, if a claim is a claim.
All right. Well, now, Adam, let's assume the text message is from our mate Brad, who we just created that job task analysis for. And let's look at two very different approaches that an employer or responses an employer could take, and look at the potential outcomes of those two scenarios. So why don't you start with the passive approach? Just talk through the scenario here with the new workplace activity.
Okay, so Brad is a general labourer, as we already know, with his forklift licence. He injured his lower back this morning at 8:30. He tripped over a box. He felt immediate pain. It's not overly debilitating, and there is no concerns about the claim itself and or Brad. So the workplace activity that has also just started today is that we've just won this new contract. It's for a 1-month duration, and it requires some logistical planning, the delivery of 3,200 bags of cement, 2 tons of sand, and 8,000 roof tiles. And as I've mentioned previously, Hux, I don't know why I put that detail there outside of the fact that it sounds very heavy.
Sounds heavy, mate. It does.
Yeah. So with regard to the scenario that we have here, scenario 1, we'll run through scenario 2 in a moment just to look at the difference it makes. But Brad receives no employer contact post his injury, and that text message that Hux just received. Brad doesn't obtain a job task analysis or have any discussion with his employer around suitable duties or what suitable duties might look like. Brad attends the GP appointment on his own. He tells the GP about the workplace activity, which is the detail that's in that top right-hand box, and he confirms the contract has a 1-month duration. And I suppose that when you look at the GP in this regard, and being mindful, and something that we do like to clarify with many of our customers also, is that the GP, workers' compensation for a GP accounts for around 3% of their work. So that's something to be very mindful of when we are dealing with GPs, particularly with workers' compensation. But there's 2 things that this GP has to consider with Brad attending this appointment, and that is, what might the GP consider in determining capacity for work? Is he fit for pre-injury duties? Has he capacity for some type of work, or has he got no capacity for any work? So what would you say there, Hux?
I reckon no capacity. Yeah. Look at that. I've already ticked it.
There you go. And what's the likelihood of the duration of the certificate?
Based on what we know, I'd say we'd go for the maximum, wouldn't we? 28 days, surely.
Well, I would say that just because the contract is for 1 month, and from what the doctor would know, again, and it does sound like a very heavy month ahead. So let Brad rest his back, and he can come back next month, and I'll review him then and see where he's at.
Well, it certainly sounds like his task is quite manual and a lot of heavy lifting involved. But let's move on to the next scenario. This is where the employer is a lot more proactive in the response. So do you want to talk us through what employers can do here and what the outcome might look like?
Sure, Huck. So it's the same scenario. It's the same workplace activity. The scenario is just a bit different in regard to the approach that you've taken, Hux, on this occasion. And that is that you've made contact with Brad immediately and had a detailed phone conversation. You know all about the incident and what's happened and the injury itself. You've offered support and are able to attend the initial GP appointment with Brad. You've also provided that job task analysis and the workplace activity within the job task analysis on the back of the new contract is also discussed with the GP. The workplace activity also includes the utilization of a forklift and truck, which wasn't covered off in that initial consult or the other scenario. And you also have a colleague available to assist Brad with some of those heavier tasks. 100%. So again, just looking at the different approach and having that extra information in mind, how the GP may consider certifying this the certificate on this regard.
Based on what you've said,
it for me.
Yeah, based on what you've said with having a colleague and that equipment to assist, probably some capacity for some type of work, which is what we've ticked there.
Yep. And for the duration?
Well, it's up for debate, but I'd probably say based on my experience and probably your experience, Adam, 2 weeks is probably the likely duration there for that.
Absolutely.
For the scenario.
2 weeks. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next bit here. And actually, Adam,
compare the differences of these two scenarios, Hux.
Yeah, we'll do that. And actually, I've sort of got a question about there, although we're not really responding to too many questions due to time, but I was going to quickly talk about, people ask, are we allowed to attend a GP appointment? And you are. If your worker gives you permission to do so, it's quite common for employers to attend. And I know from experience, because I've been involved in these meetings with doctors and workers and the like, that quite often the doctor appreciates an employee's attendance as it's easy, as a demonstration of support for the worker. And it's usually much easier to talk through the duties and the return to work opportunities with all the stakeholders in the room and in agreement. But again, it's the worker's choice there. So we'll see how we go. So looking at the two outcomes. Scenario one, the employer wasn't really prepared and didn't offer support to the worker. And we know that the likely certification period was 4 weeks of total incapacity. And assuming Brad works 40 hours a week, that's 160 hours of a loss of productivity, even before he gets back to the doctor for another review, which may result in another or even more time loss, maybe at a reduced time right there. Because the doctor isn't likely to send Brad straight back to work just based on what we know there as well. Whereas in the second scenario, Adam, Brad's certified fit for some lighter duties on reduced hours, but can still work 4 hours a day, and therefore the lost productivity is more like 40 hours in the first 2 weeks, at which point the doctor will probably review Brad and hopefully we'll get the upgrade in terms of hours and perhaps duties as well. So just in summary, the difference between the two examples, the two different approaches, is about 120 hours of lost productivity, which is pretty significant, isn't it? So we've spoken at length about a job task analysis, but what can an employer use if they don't have one?
You can use a job description, Hux, or a position description, whatever you reference it as. But just to give some guidance to the GP and the worker as to what suitable duty might look like.
Yeah, great. So look, we've talked about lost productivity as one of the impacts. There are other indirect impacts as a result of a workplace injury. Time and effort to backfill positions. Could be cultural impacts for those staff who are impacted or maybe doing a little bit more. There could be customer and business reputational impacts as well. Adam, do we have any other tools that we can share with the employers that we can send out as well to help support
I
the
think it's
recovery of
important,
workers?
Hux, the Recover at
Yep,
Work plan, which we'll touch on now just
here it
real
is.
quickly. So this is a CIRA document, so we're not recreating anything here, but it's a very simple 3-page document. It provides very clear guidance in regard to what the requirements are for each of the stakeholders involved. So this just gives you an idea, and we'll provide everyone with a copy of this. It's the worker's details, the worker's capacity. You would obtain that from the certificate of capacity. The duties that you'd be talking about when it comes to the suitable duties or modified duties, including the length of time, the review of and the planning arrangements. So again, really important to put your review dates in there. And then the agreement from all parties involved. And this provides very clear direction, and we'll show you real quickly very soon what research does tell us about this.
Okay. And look, we will be providing a copy of that document as well as the job task analysis, and we'll make sure we send out a copy of the slides as well for those that are wondering about that. So look, I might just quickly cover off to reinforce the importance of early reporting, Adam. Not only does it hopefully minimise premium impacts and staffing and maybe additional training costs, you have a legal obligation to do so as well. It may result in you avoiding an excess of being charged, maintain customer service, hopefully, and create a positive workplace culture. Now, there is a return to work incentive you can see in the bottom of the screen there with a little arrow and a little graph. So if you can return a worker back to work without any further wage loss at less than 13 weeks, you'll actually receive a 15% reduction on that claim cost, provided that the worker can sustain that return to work for at least a 3-month period. And that flows through to 13 to 26 weeks. It could be 10% if it takes a little bit longer. If it takes between 26 to 52 weeks, you'll still receive a 5% discount off that premium. But greater than 52 weeks, there's no discount available there, as unfortunately. So now, Adam, I understand there's some research, and you just referenced a moment ago, that supports the way an employer responds to an injury can actually have a significant outcome for the worker and the workplace. Do you want to just take us through that?
Yeah, just real quick, Hux, just realizing the time that we're just over time.
Just over, we're nearly done.
Yeah, nearly done. But this research was conducted independently by Griffith University. And when you consider what we've just spoken about, and we've been very quick going through this process, obviously, but the things that what meant most to workers through the research was trust. So where there was no concern about a worker making a claim or having discussion about a workplace injury, those workers were 3 times quicker when it come to their return to work, when we talk about those durations of 79 days. So that makes a significant difference. Communication, and again, we just touched on the written return to work plan. So those workers who have a written return to work plan were 3.5 times quicker to return to work than those who didn't. And then the post 6 weeks injury and those reporting high social functioning, which is where we keep people included in workplace discussion, engagement, although they might not be working full-time duties. So keeping them socially connected, they're 4.5 times quicker, because they're still involved, they're still part of it. Unfortunately, we have seen a scenario where someone puts in a claim for an injury and the workplace is told to not communicate with that person until such time as they get back to work.
Very common.
Not going to work. And I think the research here kind of shows us that. And then final point was the knowledge of disability. And that is just the reported support from an employer. Not that you need to know everything about the injury, but that you're aware of it and you're understanding in regard to certain treatment requirements, etc. So I suppose with this research, whilst there's legislation, compliance, timeframes, all that other stuff that we're responsible for as an employer and or an agent, icare, it's really important, this research tells us, to stay connected, keep people socially connected to your business.
Fantastic. Now we're just about to wrap up. I'm just going to refer to 2 quick things I've seen pop up on the chat If you do have any concerns about how an injury occurred, your first avenue is to talk to the case manager or escalate that to their team leader or perhaps tech manager that may be supporting that team, and they can provide you with some guidance with regards to that. And secondly, if you have a minor injury, what needs to be reported? So if an injury requires any paid medical treatment or time lost, 100% it needs to be recorded. All injuries should be put in your register of injuries template, and we'll actually send you a copy of that as well on the email. And it's good to maybe notify those just in case something comes up in the future as well. But certainly there's a requirement if there's paid medical treatment and time away from the workplace. Adam, that brings us to the end of the session here. We might just get some feedback from the group of what they thought about the session. And here we are. Here's the poll we've brought up. So between 1 to 5, how satisfied were you with the session? I'll just explain the scale. If you liked the session, you took something away and you thought it was pretty good, a 4 or a 5 is how you'd score. If you thought it was just okay, you'd give it a 3. If you didn't take anything away from today's session at all, well, you can give that a 1 or a 2. So that should have popped up for everyone now, just to respond to. Also on the screen, you've got a QR code, which shows us where we're headed over the next couple of months. Certainly traveling around the countryside here, Ballina, Hunter Valley, Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour, with a variety of different sessions, but there's more information on that QR code on our webpage as well. And for the brokers on the call, there is your important CPD code at the top of the screen there. So please put in your feedback, what you thought of the session here today. And on that note, Adam, I'll thank you once again as our subject matter expert and my special guest. And while we go off screen, I'll put the music back on, give people a chance to put in their comments and their feedback. And hopefully we can see a few people face to face in our travels in the coming weeks. Thanks again, mate.
Thanks, Hux. Good session. No and just a reminder to everyone that you will get an email providing you with the information and links provided for the tools we discussed today.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'll pop this music back on if I can get it to work. I'm having good trouble. And yeah, I'll go off screen. And thanks again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the session.
Have a great day. Bye.